something you learned? Were you born an entrepreneur?
You got to start small.
I have not allowed being a woman to hold me back.
Credibility is not just making money, it's about making sure that people trust what you're doing.
Law practice is not only about going to court, it's about advice.
It's very difficult to hire somebody who's not motivated and then make them motivated.
One of the things that I'm known for is integrity.
They have to see you as a person of integrity. It was
Right.
Welcome to the Executive Lounge with me, Nchira Addo. This is your business thought leadership program that brings you the insights from the work and lives of professionals around the world, men and women who have scaled the daunting heights of either starting their own businesses or managing or growing institutions around the world. Today we're joined by the founder of Globetics.net, a network of more than 193,000 professionals and institutions, individuals around the world who, through their collective, advance the cause of ethical action in business, in governance, in academia, and pretty much in everything that we do. Professor Christoph Stuckelberger, welcome to the Executive Lounge.
Thank you.
It's quite interesting. We have an adage in our language, the Akan language, that says, "Obianchere akwadanyami," translated loosely, that nobody teaches a child who God is, or right or wrong. If you would accept that innately we are wired to know what's right and what's wrong, why then do we need a study of ethics or ethics in anything that we do?
Yeah, a fundamental question. I mean, as you say, ethics is what is good and right, or right and wrong. That's the key question. But we have always new situations where we have maybe morality from the past, from the parents, from history, which tells us what is right and wrong. But now, what do you say about robots in the class as a teacher? Huh? What about artificial intelligence? We cannot go just back and see what our ancestors told us, because we have new challenges, and that's how ethics also has to be adapted. And we have to find out what are the roots, the core values and the core virtues, which remain the same, but we have to adapt it. That's then ethics.
That's interesting. So essentially, as our evolution rapidly changes, as we're bringing in new technology, as we're being confronted with new paradigms, it's important for us to adapt the concept of right and wrong to suit the present and even the future.
Yes and no. I mean, yes, because we have to adapt, as you say, but no, because we remain human beings, and we always think, yeah, everything is new. It's not true. I mean, fundamentally, we remain human beings. We want to be loved, and we want to love. We want to eat. We want food. We want life in dignity. That remains. And in order to have relations, we need honesty. We need trust to each other. We need integrity. So there are many things in ethics which remain. If you look at history, since 2,000 years, 3,000 years, 4,000 years, core human fundamental needs remain the same. And that's why also ethics has both, has a dynamism into future, but also has a stability of remaining stable in the core values. And core values across nations, across cultures. If you look at the old chieftainships in Ghana, for example, they had clear values of leadership, which was not corruption, which was integrity. And so each generation has this challenge how to go back to these roots of core fundamental values. And then, of course, we have differences in also worldviews, like Christian values or Muslim values or Hindu values. Maybe we come back later on that.
Okay. I'm glad you talked about, the fact that the fundamental needs of the human being hasn't changed since time. But quite often when you talk about ethics in our context, in this part of the world, the first thing that comes to mind is corruption. According to data from the World Economic Forum and the IMF, their world hemorrhage is close to about, well above $2 trillion a year. Is corruption a subset of the subject matter of ethics, or is it the whole of it?
No, it's clearly only one subject, and it's true what you say, that many people, when they hear ethics, they think first of corruption. But of course, ethics is much more. If you look at the Industrial Revolution, ethics was mainly the dignity of the workers. It was work ethics, how to, in a new industrialized world, to have a work situation which allows you a life in dignity with a just salary. So that was much more in the forefront. In the 70s, when I was a student, including in Africa, the environmental issues came up. So corruption was not the main topic. The main topic was the oil crisis and how to deal with climate change. Since 3 decades is a top topic. So then we have medical ethics, how to deal with all this medical progress. What is allowed, in vitro fertilization, should we become pregnant as a woman with artificial insemination? These are very complex questions. Extension of life, up to when? So ethics is much more than corruption, but the public perception is focused often on corruption.
Public perception is very important in driving public policy and also tackling issues that hinge on our development. Now, ethics is something that, if you look back at, in fact, amongst the SDGs, is one thread that runs through the SDGs, that if we're going to have sustainable development across the globe, ethics is going to play a critical part of this. How important, per what you've studied, is what we're doing here in Ghana and across Africa to ensuring that we position ourselves to promote ethics and ethical actions that will enhance our development?
What I see, and I had the advantage to travel around the globe, China, Russia, Indonesia, India, many African countries, South America, US, and what I observe is many people think we live in the worst of the countries. So, oh, Ghana is bad, oh, Kenya is bad, oh, Switzerland is exploiting or accepting money laundering, oh, China is, and so on. So I think first we should relax a bit and say we are on the same boat and we have a problem and everybody has to clean his house or her house, means nation.
That's right.
So not to feel now that, oh, we are the worst and helpless and so on. So we have a problem and we can solve it together. Corruption is a phenomenon which is linked to, I mean, economic development, greed, but also this expectation of a life standard which is in a way above our means. I mean, as a Swiss person, we have a footprint, an ecological footprint, which is double of what we should afford. That means we plant outside our small country. We eat the food from Africa,
That's
which
right.
is fine for commercial reasons.
That's right.
But our footprint means our ecological disaster or destruction is bigger than we should. So we should reduce our lifestyle to a lifestyle which is environmental. In your case, I think in Ghana, in this beautiful country and really promising country, we have also, I think, this challenge of a lifestyle which is to some extent beyond the means. We compare with the lifestyle in Europe or in the US or in China, but so that is one of the reasons, I think, for this disruption in corruption across the globe. But again, I think as we are here also in a business talk, I think we should see that ethics in the workplace is very key. We should look at the different sectors: workplace, public, of course, public officers, public sector, education sector. It is a challenge across the sectors. And that's why I'm committed since over 30 years now on working on anti-corruption efforts, because we have to find a way back to integrity, where we say integrity is my biggest asset I have. If I lose my reputation, then I can be wealthy but nobody trusts me. I can be a big politician but I have no reputation. So we should rediscover the meaning of integrity, and that can be on all levels: a child, a mother, a father, then up to a president of a nation.
You know, it's quite interesting you mentioned 4 facets of our society that ethics is, should play a key role: the public sector, private sector, and then at the individual level, and also in technology and other areas. Now, enshrined in our Constitution under the article of Directive Principles of State Policy, the government or the public policy of every government must be such that we promote probity, accountability, integrity, and all of these things. How important is it at that central level to preach, push, and advance ethics as compared to the responsibility of an individual to ensure integrity?
Yeah, we distinguish in ethics 3 levels: the individual ethics, the community ethics, and the institutional ethics. Individual means I am responsible for my life. I cannot just blame my parents or society that I'm a crook. No, I'm responsible. Community ethics means we together in a community, in a religious community, in a parish, in a Bible group, in a sports club, whatever, we can encourage each other to behave ethical. The third is then the institutional level: the laws, the regulations, the judiciary, the institutions. So we need the cooperation between these 3 levels. And that's where the state comes in, because, for example, judiciary is very key. If the judiciary is corrupt, there are corrupt judges, then it's extremely difficult, because then it's a signal, oh, impunity is possible. You bribe somebody and you will not be judged and will not go to jail. That's why a corruption-free judiciary is a key element. But also education. When it comes to education, if somebody goes through the education system and experiences that as he or she can get a fake certificate, or she sleeps with a professor and the professor gives the certificate based on sex for grades, then this gives the signal, oh yeah, that's the way of proceeding in life, and then you enter professional life and you continue with this signal. That's why these are key sectors. The other one is the religious sector. I mean, because people think that pastors, for example, they are men who are committed to the gospel. If they are corrupt, that's much more serious than if a businessman is corrupt, because these are benchmarks of orientation. And the 4th sector is also the media, because media should be here in order to enlighten and make transparent and inform and as much as possible tell the truth. I mean, truth. There's never a true of objectivity, but still be as serious as possible. Now, if somebody in the media just reports what brings money, and that's across the globe, that's not specific to Ghana. More and more media are so much under financial pressure that they just publish what the advert companies want to hear. So that is very serious.
Interesting point you raised, and I like the point that you mentioned that ethics in academia. It leads me to an interesting question that, you know, back in the day it was easy for when you were advancing or going to look for work, that you submit your certificate. The certificate is then sent to the school to verify. But in this fast-paced technological era where you can take certifiable courses, long distance, and all of these things, how do we guard against people obtaining fake degrees by using the power of the internet?
It's a key question. I recently wrote an article about fake certificates, and when we do some research, we see it's much bigger problem than we can imagine. There are hundred thousands of fake certificates every year sold for money. I mean, that's also corruption. It's not based on performance, it's based on just on money. And that is a big problem for academic credibility. And I was teaching in Nigeria recently, and then I met an entrepreneur, and he came to me and we talked about it. He said, I stopped even looking at the certificates of those I want to employ, because I never know if it's a fake certificate or whatever. I do not look at certificates anymore. My own eyes are the only control. I make an interview and I test in a test period the skills of a person and the integrity of the person. That's what I take. That's so serious, imagine. Yeah. And the business sector needs reliable certificates. That's why it's highly needed to have a reform and also a strengthened legal judiciary elements. More of these companies which just produce certificates and sell it, to bring them to court, to fine them. And also then the second is education, that the students are warned and said, you do a harm to you if you buy a fake certificate. It's not helping you. If you are somewhere in the internet as Mr. XYZ or Miss XYZ, and somebody said this is a fake certificate, you have big problems in the job market in the future. So it's also a self-protection to avoid that. But I really think we need a an enforcement of judgments against these kind of companies. In the plagiarism, which is also a kind of cheating, there is a big progress now, because if you quote, you just copy paste something from the internet, you quote it as, or you enter it in your PhD, for example, your doctoral studies as your own work, you don't quote it from a source, that's plagiarism. Now, we have plagiarism software. I'm, as a professor, obliged now for all master theses and doctoral theses to run the text through the plagiarism software. And then it pops up in red where in the internet these sentences can be found. I mean, that's a positive side of internet, that it's much less possible to plagiarize today, because you can be found. And there again, it's the same. If somebody submits a PhD with plagiarism, that can be just simply the end of the academic career. Because if somebody publishes that this thesis plagiarized, you will not find a job in the academic world.
Let's take a short break, and when we come back, I'd like us to explore this idea of repeated resonance, so that, you know, the concept of you're thinking the same thing, I'm probably thinking the same thing, and we're in different places, we've never met. But there's a chance that I may write an article about a subject matter and write pretty much the same things that you would write. Could the technology be misleading? Let's see where the fine-tune needs to be done. This is the Executive Lounge. More to come after this. This is the Executive Lounge with me, Inshirado, and my guest today is Professor Christoph Stuckelberger. He is a professor of ethics, and with more than 3 decades of experience, and founder of globethics.net, which is a network of more than 193,000 individuals, professionals, and institutions around the world that are leading the charge to ensure that we have a sustainable world through the practice of ethical actions. Before we went off on the break, you mentioned the importance of testing for plagiarism through software and technology, enabling you to be able to see when someone in a master's thesis or a PhD thesis have plagiarized content that's not originally theirs. But I call this concept repeated resonance, where I'm thinking about the subject and the way I may phrase it would maybe 80% or 90% or almost be the same as you would, and we're at two different places. We've uploaded our content. Maybe mine was a Facebook post and the other is something, an article for a newspaper or an online journal. And then another person writes something which is deep down from their own selves, and so this thing is resonating and being repeated. Where does technology sit in being able to tell that although the content may seem that has been used elsewhere before, it's actually original content from the person?
Sure, I mean, technology must be used in a reasonable way. That means, of course, we are human beings. That means we can think similar things in different places without being connected. But we would not express it in exactly the same wording. So plagiarism can only detect the exact wording. It's not about a similarity of ideas.
Okay.
That is still possible, and of course should be possible, and is proven. So we should see the possibilities, but also the limits of technology. I think in general, I am very much in favor of IT technologies. This is a great progress, and especially in access to information. So we have much faster and much more access to information around the globe. And that's why I founded this Globe Ethics Net as an internet platform. All these people can connect. We have the largest online library on ethics with 5 million full text documents. Why? Because I was working for 2 decades, or until now, on development, especially in Africa, but also Asia. Now, I have seen for so long time, you go to a university library, the physical library is so poor, no money to buy books, or when it's there, it's stolen or not brought back. So that's how I said we need to go online. Online library is the future. A librarian in Cameroon told me recently, the advantage is the book cannot be stolen. It's still there.
It is
and
always
everybody
there.
can download it.
That's true.
So that's really a big advantage. And knowledge is the precondition for really, or is a big necessity for development. But coming back to ethics, it shows also that knowledge is not enough. Information is not enough. If it's not linked to values, you be intelligent, you have all the access to information, but you are morally still a disabled person and a crook. So that's why values education and information, access to information is so important. And today everybody has the device, the mobile phone is overflooded. And if you don't have an inner compass telling what is right and wrong, we can use this knowledge for all abuses. I mean, the most brilliant guys are the hackers. They are not stupid. They are brilliant, and they are, but they use it not for the good of the society, but for the bad.
That's right, and that's talking about the black hackers. Of course, they claim they have white hat hackers who are ethical. It's quite interesting. But, you know, in the space of academia, a few years ago, maybe a year or two ago, we had a series of incidents where a number of institutions were, you know, singled out for having professors and lecturers who had fake certificates. Now, you've broached the concept of the importance of having, you know, ethics in that space. But for a country like Ghana, where we're yet to plug into the digital highway at the point where we're able to deploy all these, you know, the checks for plagiarism and certificates and things like that, we're still at a pretty granular stage compared to the rest of the world. How do we ensure that we're able to detect some of these things before we unleash some of these unqualified people on an unsuspecting population?
Yeah, that means that we need really an improvement of the control mechanisms. But that starts from the very beginning, accreditation of new universities, then up to regular control and supervision, and the admission procedures, which needs today a lot of very sincere and careful control and evaluation of staff procedures, staff evaluation procedures, because corruption is also there. You know that the problem is that if somebody with a fake certificate runs through the evaluation or admission procedure and becomes a professor, that is not that is often because then there is somewhere a nepotism aspect or an aspect of favoritism or corruption where somebody gets a position who is even not qualified. I think one challenge, and we discussed that this morning in an event here in Accra with a senior minister and also the Minister of State for Tertiary Education. I mean, 97 universities now in Ghana, for a relatively small country, beautiful, with a whole potential of development. It's just too much, in my view. And it grew from the minister of the senior minister told when he was Minister of Education. I mean, few decades ago it was 8 universities.
That's true.
6 public and 2 private. Now 10 times more. That cannot work without disruptions. So, and then that means you need to increase substantially the staff and the controls of the accreditation bodies. So we have institutional measures to take in order to reduce these kind of risks, which is a reputation risk for a country, and is also a reputation risk for the young people, because it's not helping them if they end with fake certificates. But we should also put that in relation. I mean, we are talking now on the negative side, but of course there are a lot of them, thousands, 10,000s of very honest professors and very honest students, and they work extremely hard. So we should not see only the negative side.
That's right.
And I mean, Ghana is really an example, without flattering in a wrong way, but I think Ghana has such a good record and good potential that Ghana is on a way which really can fly much higher, and not in terms of just higher education, but in terms of development. And that is what I think we need to remember. What is all this talk about education? It's not a goal in itself. It's in order to have a life in dignity for all. We want that everybody has food and shelter and education and love and community and respect for the environment. That's it. And higher education is a means for that goal. But not only higher education, also vocational training, even people without education. You know, I have a deep respect for, I know people without any education or just 3 years primary school and then that's the end. But they are so integral in their character and so hardworking and so straight and righteous in their character that I sometimes think this is really a better human beings than some people who know everything around the world and fly everywhere, but are moral crooks.
If I'm not mistaken, the Swiss workforce itself has maybe a quarter or less who are educated to higher institutions of higher learning, but the economy is doing pretty well if you look at their per capita contribution and GDP and all that. Now, you talked about disruption. I like the concept. So we're looking at the potential for some disruption on the upside. The world over, there's been the democratization of higher education. So you've got Coursera and all these other places offering, education, but over the internet. where do you see Ghana converging, you know, our development of education converging with technology?
As I said, I mean, I'm in favor of technology and distant education, online courses. We as Globe Ethics Net, we also offer online courses now on ethics. For example, also for teachers, 12 modules on ethics in higher education for professors, so that they be aware of all these ethical dimensions and then see how they can integrate it into their teaching. So there is a lot of potential. I'm really in favor of that, and also the intercultural learning. We have another series on responsible leadership, and with 12 professors, but from 12 different countries, from all continents. It's interesting to see that the concept of responsible leadership in India and in China and in Brazil and in Ghana is not so far from each other. Because we are human beings, we know what is right and wrong in a good leadership.
So at the core of our being is the same value
exactly,
system.
and we wanted to show that with 12 lectures from so different places, but showing that in fact we have much in common. Of course, then also in common in religion. I mean, Ghana has a very profound Christian background, and that helps. I mean, Christians across the globe have an understanding that leadership means stewardship. We are God's steward to serve God and not just to serve ourselves. And this is across the countries visible. So coming back to internet, I see also for developing countries, including Ghana, a big potential. But there is a but. You know, ethics is not about knowledge. Ethics is much more. Ethics is about character education. And I think character education can be done only partly online. Character education means we look at each eyes and we really look at how can we get the inner strength, also the inner courage, the resistance to resist bad practices, to resist the vices and enforce the virtues. That has much to do with personal relations and community. And that's, in my view, the limit of online. We can online, we can give information, we can give positive examples, we can compare, we can say there is a person with integrity, a case of an entrepreneur or a professor of a student somewhere. For that it's very good, but it's not enough. It needs still, we are human beings which need direct relation. And that's also that the teacher in a university is much more today than just a knowledge provider. Knowledge can be taken from the internet, but that means the teacher is more and more a coach and a trainer and I would almost say pastor. I mean, in the sense of accompanying the students to be on the right track. The methods of how to learn, how to study, how to research, but also how to implement, how to serve society. These are core competencies of a teacher today, and not just knowledge can be transferred by books, can be transferred by internet, better than this ethical training.
You know, there's three aspects of our society that quite often referred to as the gatekeepers. So, of course, the media, the opinion leaders. In Ghana, it's more the local government representatives by way of chieftaincy, community elders, and the family unit. If I will add teachers to make it a four pillars that shape our in development, where do you find the convergence? Where does the media and society, in terms of the community leadership, chieftaincy, family, where's that point of convergence? Where do we hand off to each other to ensure that not only are we picking up the knowledge, like you're saying, but also society picks up the baton and we create this continuum of ensuring that the individual within a community is living towards a certain ethical existence?
I think the one convergent point is that is the workplace. I mean, you have staff in the media. How do you to work together? This is about ethical standards. If you enter in the private sector, a company, if you enter the public service as in public administration, wherever you are in all sectors, we have a working situation where the good example of the superior, the boss, plays a key role. That's value education by example. And we have so many good examples also in the private sector. I mean, Christian entrepreneurs, for example, who I just organized a conference with Christian entrepreneurs. It's so impressive what they can do by living the example of a good leader. Hardworking, honest, transparent, innovative in new products, long-term thinking, all these elements. I think that's one point of convergence. The other one is to put on the table the pressure from economy. I mean, you as a TV station and radio station and university, we all, as a foundation also, we all have extremely high economic constraints. How do we deal with that? So the media, which say, okay, we want to be an honest, straightforward, qualified media company, we want to guarantee that we have checked news and not just we transfer within 5 minutes all photos that we receive. No, we counter-check, we do investigative journalism. That gives credibility. The same then in the court system, in the religious organizations. I think that's the common denominator. To understand a work ethics which then leads to this kind of integrity.
Fantastic stuff. Learning a lot about ethics, and the point of convergence you've outlined, quite critical, that we interface at different places, so the workplace, at church, in the society, in the community. But how does all of this play out in a world where we're becoming more insular and more independent of each other? I mean, typical example is that the Ghanaian society, as much as I can remember, used to be very communal, that you could be reprimanded, rebuked, or giving direction by a complete stranger who's older than you. Today, instruction and guidance is often limited to only the teacher at school or your parents, and people have become strangers living next door to each other. How do we improve communal ethics in a society like that?
Yeah, that's very, very important. And I think the stereotype that is often reported, Africans are community-oriented and Europeans or Americans are individualists, is no more valid. I mean, this goes across continents. There's much more. There's not only individualism in Europe, there's also community orientation, and there's a lot of individualism also in Africa today, because we live all in a modern world. Now, it's true that we have a lot of more individual freedom, because we have all direct access to information. We do not have to ask the pastor, because the pastor is the only who can read and write, as in the old Europe, for example. So this democratization of knowledge has a big dynamic. But I'm not so pessimistic to say that we are now all in our islands and in our boxes and isolated. I think there's still a lot of community. If I look here in Ghana, I mean, all the religious communities, they are so lively and so strong. It's new forms of religious, no more the traditional maybe chieftainship and village community, but there are new forms also in the urban settings. So I would not describe neither African societies nor European or American just as individualistic. It's both. It's a mixture. But the but is that we need to care for building new kinds of communities. That's true. And especially with migration. I mean, I see, for example, in Europe, the African migrants in Europe, they build strong communities. The Ghanaian community, the Congolese in Geneva, the Nigerians in Zurich. These are strong communities of peers to some extent. But then that can become insular, that they are just among themselves, and that then create all these integration problems that we are now discussed with many people who are against foreigners, because there is not a good enough integration. So into
the broader community.
Yes. So there are a lot of challenges on community building, and of course a big challenge is also broken families, and or the distance between the countryside and the cities. If the young generation goes to the city and the older generation remains in the village, this has disruptive character also. So there are a lot of and that is linked to ethics. And that's maybe why the call for ethics is also higher today, because of this fast development. It's not enough just to say what my mother told me helps for the whole life. You enter a city, you are confronted with new developments, you need to find a new answer, which is not sufficient what you heard from the ancestors and from the parents. So that's how ethics has to be built in Bible groups, in discussion groups, through media. Media play a key role in values formation, because de facto, I mean, every emission on TV or radio is sending messages about values, positive or negative.
We're going to take another break, and when we come back, we're going to look at the frontiers of technology, where that's taking us, and what ethical hurdles we're going to have to get over when we get there. This is the Executive Lounge, and we'll be back after this. Welcome back to the Executive Lounge. Professor Stuckelberger, it's quite interesting. You know, we've talked about ethics in academia and all of that, but in the financial services sector, I mean, the global meltdown of 2007 was down to grand, you know, unethical behavior on the part of some investment bankers, or one investment banker who made off with people's money. How can Ghana learn from that, and where do we put in the right pegs to keep the business of the financial sector and allied business community ethical?
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about business ethics, corporate responsibility, and there's also a lot of improvement. I mean, there are strong standards now also in the finance sector due to 2007, 2008. But also others. I take the initiative from South Africa of Mervyn King. I know about integrated reporting, ISO 32,000 anti-corruption standard. There are a lot of standards now which really help. So to implement standards also on a national level, and to make to push the business sector to go into these standards and accept and implement, give them not only sanctions in terms of laws, but incentives. The state has a lot of possibilities for incentives for business which is honest, which is with integrity, which meets the reporting standards, to say this gives we give you advantages when you meet these standards. Then the international cooperation, that's the second, which is important for ethics in business. We cannot do that alone. Between Switzerland as a banking nation, and Ghana, bilateral agreements, tax avoidance strategies, you need the tax from the private sector as from individuals. That's key for development of Ghana. So these legislative measures are key for business ethics. And then, of course, the third is the individual conviction of the entrepreneur to say, no, I want to be strict. I go into the mining sector, and mining sector is a sensitive sector, but we can do honest business also in the mining sector.
How does the individual continue to be optimistic and follow through on their own ethics in an environment where sometimes it's very difficult to do the right thing, you know? Ease of doing business, filing papers and things like that tend to be cumbersome and costly in terms of time and resources. So sometimes there's the tendency to avoid the cumbersome system, and so you can get on with life.
It is, but you know, the states know that they cannot attract investors if they have not a better rating in terms of the anti-corruption or corruption perception index, for example, of TI. So the governments must be interested, and Ghana is a good example to go this path with the NACAP, the National Anti-Corruption Action Plan. So these are things which are encouraging for the business, because business do not want to do corruption just for fun. They do it because they want to do business, and if they want to do business, they say, okay, if I have to bribe a minister, I do it in order to get the deal. And but if the government says no, there is no way, and that the business is positive. So I think. The legislation, and the other one is, even if there is a corrupt environment, individuals can make a difference. And I know enough entrepreneurs with integrity who can do this work, but also the trade unions play a role. I mean, they are also balancing power, so also the trade unions have to be part of these anti-corruption campaigns and efforts.
Now, I'd like us to talk, as we wind up, about robotics, artificial intelligence, the ethical challenges of the future, if we could say that. Recently, there's an invention of a doll that can be, you know, a companion for intimacy. Are there ethical issues that we need to be looking out for, even in areas like surrogacy and artificial insemination or in vitro fertilization and things like that?
There are a lot and very complex issues. I was for 10 years member of the Swiss Ethics Committee on Bioethics of the Swiss government, and we had to deal with all these issues. It's really not easy. That's now complex ethics in a modern world. But artificial intelligence, to take it as an example, is a chance. I mean, we can develop new products, new services, we can be more productive and so on. But at the end of the day, there is one main key ethical element, that is, do we create job or do we kill job? We know that we all have to live, and we have growing populations, and we need a fast growth of more jobs. And the big fear is that artificial intelligence is killing jobs instead of creating jobs. Now, that must not be. As long as we have the clear ethical benchmark, yes to artificial intelligence, as long as they create jobs more than they kill jobs. I mean, shifting jobs from one sector to the other, that's normal, that's in human history always the case. But at the end of the day, we need more jobs and more income for people to live. That's the ultimate key criteria for me, if artificial intelligence and robotics is positive or not.
It's been fantastic talking to you on the Executive Lounge, but I'm curious to know, what do you do to relax?
Relax?
Yes, when you're not traveling the world teaching
Yeah.
What do you do to relax?
I'm blessed that work is for me relaxing. You may be astonished, but you know, talking with you is work, but is enjoying, and I'm so motivated to see also these developments in Africa, for example. So I try to relax also while working, because relaxing means to have satisfaction of it's meaningful what I do, and it is a contribution, hopefully a little contribution to a better world, and this gives me a lot of energy. So relaxing means to refill your battery, and I do it during work, but of course family and a bit of skiing in Switzerland or whatever is also needed.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Professor Christoph Stuckelberger. It's been an awesome time talking to you.
Thank you so much.
So, we have our takeouts from this, but I can tell you, I'm not going to give you 5 takeouts today. It's very simple. That you work on yourself, have the values of integrity, respect for other people, fairness, accountability, and more importantly, think about how your actions affect the lives of other people. Does it improve the world you live in, or does it kill the world you live in? These are the thoughts I leave with you today on the Executive Lounge. We'll be back again with more soon. For now, go forward, make rain. Shalom.